You want it? We have it. The hottest mortgage and real estate strategy broadcast in the nation. A Smarter Way Home with your host, Danielle Boote and Victor Bals. 50 years combined experience, ranked in the top 1% in the nation for home loan originations 2020. Promise to expand your knowledge, utilizing creative mortgage financing and home buying strategies. Build a bridge for a better quality of life. Get your brain cells firing for a smarter way home. And welcome to another episode of A Smarter Way Home. I am Victor Bals, loan originator over 20 years, and we like to discuss modern home buying and mortgage solutions for real estate professionals and consumers alike. I would like to introduce my co-hostess with the mostest, worked for several years, Mrs. Danielle Boote. How are we?
Good morning. I'm good today.
Good. It is, again, another beautiful day here in Detroit, and we have some very, let's call it uncertainties in the market. A lot of volatility in the market, interest rates going up, and this is having some effect on values and home sales, and we're going to talk about that today. And who do we have in here today?
Yes, it is our pleasure to introduce Mike Wilbanks. He is a professional appraiser serving Livingston County and the surrounding areas. And he has been an appraiser, I believe now, I hate to say, for over 35 years. And
40.
For over 40 years, and he has joined us before, but we value Mike's opinion and really felt that this would be a great chance to get him in the studio again, talk about what has happened. It's been almost a year since you joined us, I think, and where are we in 2022 and where we think 2023 is going.
Mike, welcome aboard.
Thank you for having me again.
Appreciate it. And thank you for the muffins.
You're welcome.
Those look like some pretty good muffins. I can't believe they weigh so much. 3 muffins got to weigh about 9 pounds. Those are some pretty heavy muffins.
Brighton Coffee House.
Oh, they got the best muffins.
They do have good
and
stuff.
really good coffee.
Yeah. So anyway, talking about the market here, because we're seeing some, I don't want to really say price drops. We're seeing some appreciation leveling off. There's still some sales out there. What's going on in the market, man? What are you seeing with appraised values? Are orders up, down? What are we seeing with values?
We certainly have seen orders go down in terms of volume. And by that, I mean, inevitably, we don't target the refinance market. Mm-hmm. We tend to be realtor-orientated. Inevitably, you get it, though. Mm-hmm. And I think that's pretty much completely fallen off. So, but we are seeing more FHA, RD, that kind of thing. And we, for 2 years, we almost never saw them.
Well, it was a conventional market because of the battle of the multiple offers. And we too are seeing
sellers will pick conventional over the government loan. So this is honestly from a positive standpoint. If the buyer's qualified, right, the seller's still getting an offer on the house, but this gives more opportunities, particularly the first-time home buyers that usually use those loan programs in many cases.
And there's always been, and I hate to say this, there's that stigma with government loans that they are less worthy of a conventional, and it's quite the contrary. These are well-qualified buyers.
And sometimes have lower cost to the buyer.
And they're more advantageous for the buyer. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so that's one of the good signs we're seeing is the different types of financing that's coming about here. What are you seeing? We hear the word, I'm waiting for the market to crash. The market's crashing. What's going on with the market, Mike? What are you seeing on values?
In my opinion, I don't have a crystal ball, but it's not 2008. It's a different, statistics. We're seeing it level off.
Which is healthy.
And
it's let's call it a more balanced market than just being completely tipped to the sellers.
And don't you agree too? I think the positive thing with FHA and RD, if you will, it's usually, like you said, a first-time buyer gives them a chance at home ownership, and now they have that, and the prices level off a little bit. Hopefully, more people can buy homes.
Right.
So are you seeing, because explain, when you do an appraisal, you go back how many days to look for comparable sales? How does that work?
We're allowed to go at least 1 year. We try to stay fresher than that. But as you guys know, in Livingston, if you have a 20-acre house on 20 acres, you're going to have to go deeper and farther and stuff like
to
that.
see the most recent sales.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it works in our favor now. Instead of us chasing the market before, in 24 hours the market had changed. Now it's, I hate to say the word easier, but it's getting more in line, the data. It's not every house sale is a home run in that neighborhood.
Okay.
Right.
Question on values. I don't know if you can give a percent or an opinion on what are you seeing from the purchase agreements coming in on the actual purchase price versus the appraised value. Are you having any difficulties meeting that criteria, or are the realtors off keel, or how's that going?
I think it's a good question. We're finding that the contract price is very much in line with market value now, and by that I mean it's not $50,000 over the list price and those kind of scenarios. And I hope that answers it. I think that it's we don't see too many overbids and stuff like that. So I think it feels stable, more normal.
Are the so it appears that the realtors are doing their job on their market analysis to set the price?
Yeah, I think the realtors are super sophisticated on that now, and they're really on target.
Well, that's really good news.
Now,
Yes.
we've started to see an occasional price reduction.
Agreed.
So what's your opinion on that and what we're seeing in the market?
I would imagine, in my opinion, that the homeowners have some influence on the realtor listing it. And frequently, as we know, we'll hear, well, if that house down the street got 300, mine's 3.25, or they want that home run. And now it's stable. It's I wouldn't say necessarily it's a buyer's market, but it certainly is balanced out.
Well, I've seen a lot. There's different strategies that the realtors will use these days, right? Sometimes they will list on the low side of average to sell the house faster because, for instance, if they list a house for $295 in a neighborhood that's been going for $310, you're going to get a lot of attention quickly. You're going to get multiple offers, and that house is probably going to sell for between $315 and $325, versus overlisting it and have it sit there and then have to do price reductions. So I do think, from talking to the realtors that I've spoken to recently, they said, yeah, we will struggle with some sellers where the seller thinks that their house is worth, because their house, of course, is better than all of the neighbors' homes that just sold, that they want to go a little bit higher. And right now, this is not the right strategy for listing a home.
I would agree with you, and I'm sure you guys saw it and the realtors saw it. We will do pre-listings on occasion. It's not really something we target, but if it's a good friend, very complex property, and one in particular, we went out there, and it would be a friend we would all know, and very knowledgeable, and the rates are in the 3.75. Well, I'm going to wait 6 months. I'm going to get it cleaned up. Well, then the rates were totally changed, and that market for her home just dissipated virtually. And she withdrew it after a week. And
wow.
Yeah, so I felt some people may have lost that window of
Right,
opportunity,
right.
of that frenzy of buying.
Well, spring is always, we were discussing in a recent show that we did, there's always a seasonality to real estate in Michigan and any state. I just talked to somebody from Florida that said, oh no, July and August in Florida is their slow months. Okay. Because why? It's so hot down there. Okay. When we slow down when it's cold, right? They slow down when it's hot. But in Michigan, we had such a slow winter last winter that buyers were getting anxious. The psychology of the buyer was, we want to buy, but we can't buy because there's nothing on the market. And we're worried about where interest rates are going to go. Then when real estate started hitting the market, it was this frenzy because for every house that went up, there were 10 buyers that were ready to write an offer because they've been looking. And the demand right now from that first-time home buyer segment of the market is still huge. They'll be in excess of probably 35% of the market nationwide.
Wow. Did not know that.
Yeah.
Good. And I
Yep.
hope they have that opportunity to buy. I really do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I've got a question here. So when an agent or when a lender submits a purchase offer for you to get an appraisal, do you actually look at the purchase price and say, what are they shooting for? Or are you just going out and getting an appraisal and then read the purchase agreement for the number?
No, we definitely look at the purchase agreement. Others, and I don't speak for any other appraisers, may say they don't, but you have to. It's
Yeah.
data
Yeah.
that you have to look at. And I think from an appraisal standpoint, there's no way you're accurate to $1,000 or something. And
right.
you guys have probably had over the years, right, where they come in $2,000 low. And
Yeah.
I just know I can't be that accurate.
Right.
I'm just not.
Well, my question was, or I guess my concern or my thought process, isn't that influencing? Because we as lenders cannot influence an appraiser. We just can't do that. But to me, by having a purchase agreement with a number on there, that's kind of influencing what they're shooting for. It's almost like, okay, you got a offer on 123 Any Street. Go do the appraisal, give me a current market analysis of what you think the value is. Then we'll see what the purchase price is.
But once it's listed, everything's public record. So
Understood.
you keep, everything's on Zillow and Realtor.com, and so it's not like you can hide that fact, purchase agreement or no purchase agreement.
Well, and this brings up the other situation, because I've had many debates about this, as that when you see a purchase agreement come in and it has $6,000 in seller concessions, and by all means the appraisal comes in $6,000 less than the purchase price. Are the appraisers looking and saying, oh, I see they're trying to bake in concessions, or are we really looking at value? Does that have any influence at all?
I think it's, again, a great question. We'll go to the seller concessions. We're always solving for value. And I'll hear that, and I think most appraisers agree with this. They're not going to come in, let's say $6,000, because I'll come in $6,000 low. We're supposed to be mirror, reflect value, period, and that's it. And I think, too, to credit, though, the realtors in our community are super sophisticated. They know what the value is, and they're not going to get themselves into something that's going to come in low, and then you got to put it back on the market. So I think we're really fortunate to work with great realtors that really do have a really good pulse on value. I know frequently, I have to reach out to people. What do you think on this house? What do you, and the realtors are always my first phone call. So
did they help you dig up data? And did they? Is it good when a realtor meets the appraiser at the house, bringing comparables? Is that a good practice or not?
I highly recommend it. We were fortunate enough. We were at Coldwell last week we talked about that, and I think it's always good to build relationships. You meet the realtor, you get to know him, him or her, and you learn. The realtor always, in my opinion, will have great insight on it, though, in the sense of, these countertops were put in 6 years ago. That may not be on the listing. They can bring so much to the table, so much data, and I would strongly recommend, if possible, the realtor meet the appraiser.
Well, it is important, I guess, if you're a potential seller, think about this. If you bought your house 5 years ago and put in new granite or put a new roof on, right? Painting the interior of your house is cosmetic in most cases. But major upgrades are important for the appraiser to potentially know, or even to list your property, because you can say, well, here's what I bought the house 5 years ago for, and here's what I did to the house to improve its condition. Granite countertops are valuable. A new roof is valuable. Finishing a basement is valuable. Those are the things that will impact the future value of the home. And not only does a potential buyer need to know that, but the appraiser should also know.
I agree. And I'll throw this out to you guys. One of the topics that came up is, let's say the house had sold hypothetically 5 years ago, and then within the last 2 years, and now it's listed. Frequently, the current listing agent, let's say 5 years ago, they put in those granite countertops. Well, time it weeds down, right? They won't have it on the listing ticket anymore at that point. And the point is, even though you're currently listing it or you're currently appraising it, to try to get that back information from 5 years ago, 6 years, even though they weren't the homeowners.
We don't know they didn't have granite countertops back then.
Right, exactly. And so it can be missed. But in our world, as you guys see the reports and stuff, we have specific columns for that. Has the kitchen been remodeled in this blank time, and you got to pick it. And so it's crucial information. And again, the good agents will do it, but when it hits that MLS, as we use it as a comp too, if they have some of that information, it's always helpful.
Question here. So I've got a client I'm doing a refinance on right now. it's a divorce situation, and he needs to take cash out of it. And he's saying, I don't want the appraisal yet. I got to clean up the yard, and I want to declutter it. I want to put new mulch in. Do those type of things affect value?
I think to some degree it does. Certainly, in my opinion, one of the best things you can do for value is freshen up the mulch or fresh coat of paint.
Really? Okay.
And this is how I look at it.
Aesthetically.
Yeah.
It's that first impression.
Curb
Elbow
appeal.
grease,
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think, from the appraisal end, as you guys know, I'll write an appraisal and it may end up being underwritten in Texas. They don't know our community necessarily. So the photos become
The underwriter's eyes. Yeah.
First impression to the underwriter.
Yeah.
So we still have to, get it through underwriting, for lack of better words.
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't show as well as we like in the photos, I think sometimes the underwriters can have a little more pushback to it than if it photographs well.
Wow, that's interesting. I didn't think that just a mulch and a cleanup would, so it is
I think
first
so.
impression.
Well, I guess my concern, even in a refinance, is it shows pride of ownership. For instance,
Yeah.
we've discussed, I have a weed problem at my house this year that I'm dealing with. I would be mortified if somebody came and took a picture.
That her husband won't help her pull the weeds out.
Well, he's got a bad back right now.
Good one. So do I.
He'll squeeze the weed killer. But you wouldn't want somebody to show up on a day when it doesn't look right, or and we all live in our houses, and that's okay. But I don't want somebody to come and take a picture when I got dishes in my sink.
Yeah.
That all happens to everybody. So,
Oh, well, let me ask you this. Is there a difference on a refinance appraisal versus a purchase appraisal? I think there's a myth out there that says refis are notoriously lower.
I appreciate you bringing that up. It's 100% a myth. And I don't know where those things get started. And I say that respectfully. I respect everyone's opinion on that, but the value's the value, and that's it. It's I don't believe appraisers are targeting it. Oh, this is a sale. I got to do this, or a refi. I just don't see that.
Okay, there's nothing there. Okay, so local appraisers versus these AMCs, is that what they call them when they come out of Toledo or something like that? Yeah. And I'm just going to bring up just a hypothetical. You got a house, and in the backyard there's a railroad track going through it, but that Toledo appraiser doesn't know that it hasn't been used in 35 years. Would that be a typical thing that you, as a local appraiser, would have an effect on appraisal?
Absolutely, and that brings up a good point. I think the realtors agree with this, that when they bring in an appraiser, hypothetically again from Warren, they're not going to know Lake Chemung. They're not going to know Crooked Lake, Portage Lake. You know what I mean? All the nuances where it can change from block to block, which side of the lake, those things. They're not going to have that. It's the vacated railroad tracks that are no longer active. And I believe strongly in local lender, local realtor, local appraiser, because then we're all, we know each other, we know how we work, and we're knowledgeable of our market.
Well, because as we find in some instances where there is an out of local, like a lot of times when they work with the big banks, they'll get them from out of state or out of area, and they use that. All of a sudden, there's a problem with appraisals hitting a lower value, and now the dispute process comes in. Can you explain what the disputing of value process is, and what work do you have to, or efforts do you have to do?
Well, at this point, I'm pretty fortunate. I don't have that in the sense of my clients I've worked with a long time, and they usually have a chief appraiser on staff, so they'll filter it. But on occasion, you get it, and all you can do is politely go over the information. It's possible the appraiser did miss something, and you have to.
We're human.
Yeah, you have to own it. You correct it. You want to be correct and fair, and certainly listen to people. Let them express their opinions, because you may very well learn something. Yeah. So
what's I think important in this market, and this has really been in excess of 18 to 24 months, is we certainly really don't want comps that are a year old. And I think it's important for the realtors on both sides of the transaction to understand what has recently closed, for instance, in the last 90 to 180 days, but also what's on the market and what's pending sale. Because if the house 2 doors down is pending sale, we really can't use that as a comparable until it's closed. But if we enter into a contract 2 doors down, and you know that house down the street is going to actually close next week, that might be information to say, hey, if you're concerned about this because of where market conditions are going, then maybe we don't order the appraisal right away and let that property close.
And they can get that tight, can't they?
Yeah.
Where you need that one to close.
Yes.
It'll
Because it's shifting.
solidify the
It's
position.
shifting the position.
Well, this all of a sudden brings me back to a thought of the old 2009 era, where that house here is priced for $300,000, but the one next door sold for $180,000 because it was a distressed sale, short sale. You remember we used to have those things, and we had to justify taking that sale out of the comps because of a distressed sale. Do you see any distressed sales out there right now?
I think that's a great question. I'm glad you guys brought this up. I've been watching. I watch the Brighton market, it's like Livingston, but Brighton. My kids went to school there, so I just have a pulse on it, I think. And there's been a couple of, unfortunately, and I say that with totally sincerity, where foreclosures have popped up. And it's gone just the opposite of what Victor just said. They're overlisting them really high.
And the houses are in poor condition generally.
Generally, they are. And so now we're seeing them sit. They're really, that's what we've seen of late. Just the opposite of what we saw in 08, 09, when they were just,
dumping them
to get the...
Well, if someone, I guess from the foreclosure standpoint, here's a great conversation. We had a foreclosure moratorium for 2 years? Since COVID.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
that's right. Yep.
There could be, and so people will go, well, where's all the foreclosures from COVID? Well, guess what? Home prices have gone up dramatically. Most people are not in distress, but if someone was in distress, for instance, pre-COVID, and that foreclosure has been now delayed for 2 years, you could have multiple situations, but here's what you could have: one situation where the owner moved out, passed away, whatever. House has been vacant for 2 years or more. That is never a good situation. Or you could have a situation where the homeowner is stayed in the house, not making mortgage payments for 2+ years. Do you think they're taking care of the house? No. They're not painting. They're not changing furnace filters. They're not maintaining a water softener. They're literally going to do nothing because they're in distress. And in normal times, a distressed homeowner that gets foreclosed upon is not going to sit there for 2+ years. So for the buyers that might be listening to go, well, I'm waiting for the market to crash. If you're going to buy a foreclosed home, you need to be prepared. It is not going to be pretty. It is not going to be move-in ready. And I've seen maybe just a couple. The houses were literally gut jobs. These are homes that who knows what the seller situation was.
They literally took the kitchen sink.
Yeah. The house can be in extremely poor condition, not mortgageable. It ends up being a cash sale where somebody's going to have to come in and gut it to the studs and rebuild. And, for instance, Brighton, the city of Brighton is actually very small. There's not that many homes in the city of Brighton. Brighton's very charming and people love Brighton, but most of those homes are very old. There are homes that are 100+ years old. They require more maintenance, more care, more upkeep, and the right homeowner. So you go, well, this is not, it's not just, remember back in the day, like in the 90s, you'd see a foreclosed home and you could see the nicotine on the wall. Well, that was a scrub job. A first-time home buyer could handle maybe stripping wallpaper and scrubbing nicotine and kilsing and, repainting. But some of these homes that may hit the market, again, you got to think, why is this vacant? There are a fair amount of estate sales that we see. I know of a client right now, a realtor working on a transaction with one of those. And well, first of all, you can tell they've been having an estate sale, and you can tell that whoever lived there was probably there for 30 to 40 years. So in that situation, you have an elderly seller that maintained the home, but they didn't update anything. Those homes are going to be harder to sell.
I got a question because you just brought up these historical homes. Historical homes are unique properties as far as I'm concerned. And now we've got these in downtown Howell, downtown Brighton. Isn't that more of an art when you're appraising these homes, or is it because of the historical value? Does that add any element or difficulty to the appraisal process?
I think it's a case by case, but there's a perception. My house is built in 1890s, so it's special, but usually your comps are going to be built in the early 1900s as well. I think particularly in Howell, it's common. So you're almost hoping to have that house.
Okay.
In Brighton, like Danielle, they're all over the place, right?
Yeah.
You get in fairway trails or whatever, they're newer, downtown older. And so, but no, I think at the end of the day, whether it's historic, and it'll come down to statistical data. What's the square footage? Is it a good view? What's the condition? And those are the main.
I think the hard
things.
part with older homes, and you see this in Howell, some of them are done to the nines, right? Gorgeous woodwork, high ceilings, large spacious rooms, which is a completely different caliber than, a 1,000 square foot 2-story that had no fancy woodwork, and there's still original windows from 120 years ago. There's just, and I think that's really hard for buyers, because they look and go, well, I want to be on this end, but look at that. I'm like, well, that's not this, so you kind of have to go, there's different grades, let's say, particularly of the older homes.
Okay, so, but this, because an older home with old windows from 100 years old, how does that compare to maybe another old home with newer windows? What are the biggest bang for the dollar when a person is attempting to valueize their home? Is it windows? Is it a new septic field? Is it a driveway? Those would all have, to me, a driveway wouldn't bring no value. You expect it to have a driveway, whether it's stamped concrete or regular concrete. What is your opinion on that, Mike?
Again, that's a good question. Karen and I just went out and looked at one the other day, and the driveway was, because of tree roots,
Right?
Oh yeah.
stuff. And you're
Was
right,
it like gravel or paved?
asphalt?
Oh.
So and
Yeah,
they hadn't
that can
done
be
it,
bad.
And it was most likely an estate would be, or you can tell once you go through the house. And I think it's difficult to extrapolate a driveway, but if you ever had to replace one yourself, you're going, that's got to add some value.
Right. So poor in a driveway situation, a very poor condition driveway could detract.
Absolutely.
But, for, like you said, Vic, people getting fancier with stamped concrete or brick paver driveways or whatever, that's really going to depend the price point. If you're in downtown Howell and put brick pavers in, you're not going to get any value. But if you're in Pine Creek, that could be looked as an increase in value. Yeah. But certainly, a 40-year-old asphalt driveway that is like driving over a bumpy 2-track.
But where do I put my 10 grand? Into the driveway or into upgrading the septic field?
Well, if the septic field doesn't work, that's a major defect.
But it doesn't have much life. I mean, where do you? To me, if you're putting money underground, nobody can see that.
Right. That's a valid point.
But that's a selling point. I think a buyer looking for an opportunity could deal with a driveway. I mean, you could pull out asphalt and return it to gravel if you really didn't have the money to pave it again. But a failed septic field is
Let's cancel the septic field. Do I put 10 grand in the driveway or 10 grand in the kitchen?
Kitchen.
My recommendation would be, to me, and this has been consistent through my career anyways, is good old-fashioned elbow grease. Keep it clean, keep it neutral, and freshly painted. And you can get away, it doesn't have to be the most modern, but bang for the buck. Have it clean, have it painted, fresh mulch, nicely cut lawn, and that's where the real return is.
Yeah. My old man always said it only takes a dime to be clean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And so that's what we recommend. And there was at one point where we did a fair amount of relocation work for the Big Three, and they asked you to do that, and that was always our first thing. Clean,
neutralize,
neutral, and it doesn't cost that much, especially if you're not afraid to paint it yourself.
Right. And if you're planning on moving, start packing up your stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Minimize the clutter.
Yeah, minimize the clutter.
I mean, do you ever come into a situation where you go into a house and say, you know what? I'd like to give you some advice. Declutter this place and paint this before I come back.
No.
No? Okay.
We can't. We'd probably offend somebody with that.
Maybe you could have a consulting business before you go out there. You know?
That's the realtor's job.
Yeah. I think it's a valid point, but it's really the same basic rules we've always done in real estate, and keep it clean, keep it neutral, and you're going to go a long ways. And I think, I said it before, but the mulch and get rid of those shrubs from the 50s.
Oh,
put in a
yeah.
nice little, modern-
Oversized, overgrown shrubs. Yeah, that's a
Oh,
deterrent.
Just pull it out and get something cleaner.
Yeah. So now none of us have a crystal ball, but where are your thoughts for the winter of 2022 into going to 2023? What are your thoughts about the real estate market and what we might see in the next 6 months?
In my opinion, right now, may be hard, not seem as logical as I'd like it to be, but the rate is still good right now.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get used to it. It's never going to be 2 again. Well, maybe 2 again, but
Well, we hope not, honestly.
okay.
Ultimately.
And so, my experience, that's 5 and 6 is really not a bad rate. We'll get used to it, and we'll go. I think we'll be fine.
Do you remember what your interest rate was on your first house?
13%. Michigan went through Mayflower Mortgage.
Yeah.
That had to be in, 1980 then?
Yeah, 83, I think, maybe something like that.
Yeah. So our first house, I think, was in 1990 for 10.5% on an FHA loan.
1986, 10.5% FHA loan. I thought, how in the hell am I going to afford a $343 a month house payment?
Yeah, that was a
now
lot of
my
money.
cell phone's double that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And right when you guys said 10% or whatever, you were happy to get it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Jim and I were like, well, 10.5% can't be bad. We heard about the stories of the people having 13, 15, 16, 18%.
Yeah.
So I do agree that I think the biggest perception is that, rates are, when people are worried about rates. For instance, you think about the first-time homebuyers, they maybe have only been thinking about buying for a year or two. And if they looked at that post-pandemic unique market,
actually pandemic market,
Correct.
when they see them in the high 2s and the
Yep,
low
low
3s, they think,
threes.
well, when is that coming back? So they still
Probably
have that
never.
notion.
Yeah.
That was a fluke. Yeah. You'll see that once in a lifetime.
Well, ultimately, even if we touch into a recession, right, in the next year, real estate values typically will still go up during recessionary times. Maybe not as fast as we've seen the last year or two, but honestly, we don't want to maintain that because that's not healthy growth. Let's get it to level off where a seller can kind of know what their house is worth and the buyer knows where they can jump in the market. And if it's the right time for you to buy, jump in. You'll still be happy in 5 years that you weren't renting for 5 more years.
Absolutely. I've got a question. Since the mortgage business has slowed down, the real estate business has slowed down, has the appraiser business slowed down, and are we losing appraisers out of the system?
I don't know if we're losing appraisers out of the system yet. I can only speak for my office, and during the pandemic and the craziness, we were working as you guys were, because I drive by your office going home.
You're like, they're
12-hour
still
days,
there.
7 days
Yeah.
a week. And now for us, I guess we probably don't have quite as much volume, but we're still,
Steady.
we're okay.
Yeah.
But now I get to go home at 6 or 7.
Yeah.
Right? And
There's nothing wrong with that.
yeah, I think we all worked ourselves because we knew it was going to only be it can't go on forever.
Right.
Right.
It just couldn't. So I think now is more comfortable. I don't know about you guys, but it's I like the market just how it is right now.
I wish it was a little bit better, a little bit more volumes in that, and I wish the rate environment was good or better, but there's still a lot of great opportunities for.
I would
a
just
lot of
like the
people.
rates to stabilize.
Yeah.
If we could just stay for a few months in the same range, that would be a lot easier to explain.
Well, it's all this uncertainty, the volatile in the market, the inflation, when we got the election, we've got the war. There's a lot of uncertainty, and people hate uncertainty.
Yeah.
But I guess that's the one thing about consistency is it's inconsistent. It's consistently inconsistent.
Well, the good thing about owning real estate is that it can help protect you from inflation. Because once you have your loan and your interest rates locked in, right? That's where you're going to be. And other than, minor taxes or insurance adjustments on a year-to-year basis, at least that's where you are.
Yeah,
you know?
inflation is your friend because inflation goes up, wages go up, but your house payment stays the same.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Can I ask you guys
Yeah.
a question?
Yeah.
What are you seeing in the market today in the sense of what kind of buyers are dominant, and what do you think we're going to be looking at as we move forward with the interest rates in the market? What's your thoughts on it?
I think that we're going to continue. We're going to see an increase in government buyers, which I think is definitely good. We're already seeing it, like you had mentioned. More sellers are willing to accept buyers with government financing. We are starting to see seller concessions return a little bit, not in great detail, but in small amounts. And that can be a tremendous motivator for a buyer because these buyers are scraping together down payment money and closing cost money. Even, $3,000 to $5,000 seller concessions can really help a buyer get it to the finish line. And we're talking about qualified people, but it's hard to save money right now with inflation where it is. So I think the government loans will increase, which I'm hoping will bring more buyers back to the market that basically have been like, oh, I don't know if I can afford this. Right. And I do see, as prices have gone up, $250,000 to $400,000 is like the sweet spot. That is where you're going to get first-time home buyers in our market and people that are downsizing, people that, split household situations. Sometimes divorce pops up, second-time home buyers. That there's still going to be a fair amount of competition because there's only so much of that housing available in our market.
I think for the well-qualified buyer, this is a great opportunity because they are objective conscious. I want a roof over my head now. Mm-hmm. They're not so rate conscious. They're not so payment conscious. They may be a little bit cash to close conscious, but they want to meet that objective of home ownership, and they will marry that home and date that loan because we know rates should come down next year. I personally believe rates will peak in November. Okay, and then I think they will continually raise the prime rate, which will help reduce inflation. And when we reduce inflation, interest rates will come down. So I think we're going to have a very strong spring buying season. And the people right now, the first timers, in January, these rates were at 3%. That $300,000 mortgage in January is now costing $500 more here in September per month. And when we look at the inflation factor, those couples and the average family is spending about $300 or more a month on gasoline, food, clothes, miscellaneous, and entertainment.
At least, yeah.
So that's $800 more a month to afford that $300,000 mortgage. So the ones that were near qualification or just right there are a little uncertain, and the market hates uncertainty. But as we stabilize, rates come down, I think we're going to have a great 2023.
Well, nationally, I think it was NAR that just released data on what the average buyer's debt-to-income ratio is. And Michigan buyers only spend 17% of their household income pre-tax on their housing expense. From a mortgage standpoint, we generally do not want that number to be over 30. So when you look at the fact, and this is Michigan data, this is not nationwide data, and we see this right every day in our office that we're right. Most buyers are spending less than 20% of their income on their housing expense. So when you look at, when a lot of people, naysayers will say, well, people are overbuying, they're not. This is not the early 2000s. So if that buyer is qualifying at $300,000 and it's only 17% of their income, they could comfortably go to $325,000 and they're still only going to be at 18% of their income because people are aware and most people are not living beyond their means.
What do you guys see in the new construction market? What are you seeing out there?
It's slower right now, a lot slower.
Yes.
And people are not going in because of new construction, at least in our area, especially the South Lyon area, for example, I do a lot of work out there. I mean, these are $700,000, $800,000 homes now. Yeah. And people, because it's taken a long time to build, they are uncertain of rates on long-term locking and all that, so they're kind of putting the brakes on that.
Oh.
And I think nationwide, that's data that's coming out from the National Association of Home Builders.
We saw our new construction drop dramatically, and I appreciate you sharing that because you're trying to get a pulse. Is it they got tired of dealing with the customer directly, we've all been around long enough where they put it up and you buy it as it is.
Yes.
But now it's all customized, and I'm sure that drives the builders crazy.
Well, and the builders are getting killed here because of the inflationary measures too of materials, and still we have getting help, getting labor there.
Right.
So these timelines are still
There, it's about double the time to build a house.
Yeah.
What's the average time?
It used to be. I used to work with a builder. It was 6 to 8 months. Now it's 10 to 12 to 14 months.
And in some markets, longer.
Yeah, we see
in
both.
Florida, it's like a 2-year process. And in some, and I'm not saying that this is necessarily local to Michigan, but there are builders nationwide that are putting cost increase clauses into the contract.
Cost plus contracts. Those are coming back.
Yeah. So they say, look, we hope not to do this, but, so some of that supply and demand will be regional. If Florida's still on fire, the costs aren't going to go down. Michigan, again, is more seasonal, but I think, again, some people are tired of waiting. And I think particularly in those higher price markets, right, they're going to have a house to sell. So if they're worried about a recession and they're worried about where their current home value, is it going to continue to go up or is it going to go down while they're building a house? That is making people think twice. And if you're looking to upsize, it's kind of hard to sell your house now and go live in an apartment with your family.
Well, good
kids
luck.
and dogs.
Good luck finding an apartment.
Yeah.
Right. Good point.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
right. Where are you going to go?
Yeah. I know a few people that have sold homes that have actually, I'm talking families with kids in elementary school that they sold their house to move in with their parents while they build. And you go, well, that's great. But for most people, that is not realistic.
Well, at least you get 3 squares a day, in most cases.
Maybe.
But,
yeah.
So, Mike, what final words do you have for our real estate professionals, our consumer, about the appraisal process and or your opinion on the market here?
I think, again, we're really fortunate the realtors here are really, truly the best. And I think I've meet the appraiser out there, pass on the information, because we will inevitably may miss something. And I think the more information we have in that report, the more data that it'll justify a home, let's say, sells at the higher end of that neighborhood. Well, if we can document why they've done all these things, the windows, all the stuff we touched on, kitchen, bathrooms, and things we don't see, the septic, those kind of things, help us to present to the underwriter, the secondary market, why it's worth that value.
Well, I got to bring up one more question, because I get this regularly when a client calls and say, well, I'm thinking of selling my house. I go, what do you think it's worth? They say, well, this online site says it's this. And then I'll go to that online site, and I'll go to another online site, and I'll go to another online site, and I get 3 different values, and sometimes it's $80,000 difference between these 3 websites. And I tell the customer, I go, that's why they're free. You know, what is your stake? Do you ever get any pullback from anybody stating, well, online it says this?
Yes, inevitably, the Zestimate, Zillow, and I'm not knocking Zillow. It's just an algorithm, and it can be accurate if you have a condo in Jonathan's Landing.
Okay.
Or a cookie cutter neighborhood.
A cookie cutter, but most of us in Livingston don't have that for the most part. We're on acreage. Our house is unique a little bit, and it's not accurate at that point. And they have that in their thing said it's not accurate. And if you guys ever pull up
Nobody reads the asterisks, Mike. Come on. Yeah.
Fine print.
But for example, if my house sold 10 years ago, Zillow is not picking up that I had then finished the basement, upgraded countertops and all that stuff, or put in a pool.
Right.
Agreed. And conversely, it can go that way as well. It can inflate it, or you can be soft on that number because you've totally gutted it. And they obviously don't. But again, it's an algorithm. They say that. If you ever look at the comps that they pull, they'll show them to you. Sometimes they're listings, and as we know, we can't use that.
So call your local realtor before you think about listing your house.
I'm just looking for an objection handler when I'm talking to clients. What is the best way? Because I truly believe you are the professional. You understand this better than algorithms, right? What would be a good objection handler? How I tell the clients? Sure, they're online sites, but what would you advise me to say to them?
At the end of the day, on those kind of situations, how we handle it's going to be different than how you guys.
Right.
And I respect that. For me, it's submit your evidence. You know, I'm happy to look at any evidence, but it's not a tangible source of evidence as estimate, whatever they're using on these algorithms. Give me a sale that has truly happened within your community that you want me to look at, and I'm happy to do it, truly. So,
Okay. And I guess I got to keep going here. I'm sorry.
that's
But so now, if a consumer wanted to get a pulse, maybe on an estate sale or they're only on their home because they don't believe all the online stuff, they can hire you to do an actual appraisal on their own home if they're prepping it for sale or just want to get a reality check. Correct?
yes.
And how would that client get a hold of you, Mike?
Just call us, 810-220-1814. And thank you. Yeah, we're happy just to help out, though, too. As you guys know, you got a question, just give us a call.
Well, those, I think pre-appraisals are actually very important in divorce situations, estate sales.
Absolutely.
Because you might have, multiple family members that are trying to sell mom or dad's house. You got to get everybody on the same page, or a divorce. So that's almost required in a divorce situation when you're figuring out how to split assets.
I hate to say that, but hey, if you're planning on getting divorced, you may want to get a pre-appraisal.
Call Mike.
Call Mike.
I think, too, though, we'll, on occasion, and I think it's smart, we'll get an estate.
Uh-huh.
And you got 5 siblings.
Oh, yeah.
And so that puts that to rest.
Yeah.
To a degree, yeah.
To a degree. But it also, for us, and we try to do this, we try to guide them to our realtors from there then. Don't do for sale by owner. Please don't.
Yeah.
And I would highly recommend, here's 2 or 3 names or what have you. I think there's that misconception, I'll sell it on my own. It's like you have no idea what you're getting.
Oh,
into.
yeah. You just went into Pandora's box, Bill.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good when it's good, but it's really bad when it's bad.
I think they usually, when we'll go through on the appraisal, you guys get it too, where it was a FSBO. And I see people leave money on the table all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Things.
Yeah.
It's like, but
That's not good for the
did
market
great.
either.
And I say
Yeah.
that respectfully, but really talk to your realtor.
That's why the professionals,
Yeah.
You don't go to a general doctor for, a brain injury, right?
Yeah.
And you don't go to somewhere online to get a mortgage. You go talk to your local people. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
unbelievable.
do-it-yourself heart doctor. Yeah, my cardiologist, he's that web guy.
Yeah, clear. Okay.
Right.
Well, hey, let's wrap up the show. Danielle, any closing words, sir?
Thank you so much, Mike
Thanks
and
for having
Karen,
me,
for
guys.
joining us. We appreciate it, and great conversation.
Mike, it's always been
Thank
real. It's
you.
always real with you. We love it, man. Anyway, this is Danielle Boote, Victor Bals, and Michael Wilbanks here, and we will see you next time on A Smarter Way Home.